Good afternoon and happy Wednesday afternoon. I'm Pastor Marvin from Shabach Evangelistic Ministries. And before I begin, I want to give two shout outs. One is to our Pastor Baker for continuing to have service every Sunday. The two blasts that I'm doing, one last week and the one this week, through prayer, I know why God has given me these messages. It's because of the pandemic, because we're home and we are isolated. We're away from everyone, and church included. The Sunday service, people look forward to Sunday service. They're getting the message from our pastor, and she comes with the word. Wednesday, Bible study with Pastor Belinda. I want to give a shout out to Pastor Belinda. Continue to do that. Thursday, with Pastor Catherine, she does the message, and I have Zoom meetings on those days, and as soon as the Zoom meeting's over, I will run into the studio with my wife where she's doing it, or Pastor Catherine at home where she's on the phone. And even if I just get 10 or 15 minutes, it's food for me. I really need that. Pastor Leon, I love the question that he does every day. He has these questions, and again, it stimulates the mind. It stimulates our Christian mind, I call it, our sense of being, a sense of being there, even though we're not there physically, mentally, we're still having church. And the messages that he gave me last week and this week, I thought was interesting because, again, I mentioned it last week. I wanted to preach from 100 Days of Right Believing, the book that I taught in my ministry class. And it was 100 days, one day at a time. And when I did the plan, it deviated, it switched on me. And even today, I was going through my plan, and God just laid on me the power of relationship. And because we're isolated, home with our families, our Christian relationship, just being in fellowship, being around people of a like mind, it's suffering a little bit because I have Zoom meetings, with my colleagues and students, stuff like that. But my students are telling me they love Zoom, because it's technology, but it's nothing like being in class. So it's nothing like being in church. We have the Sunday service, but I love being in church and just talking to people, just seeing people, making eye contact, asking, how are you doing? Giving that pat on the back where we got to do the little fist bump now. We can't actually touch. But we were talking about, and I was talking about just the power of relationship. And I was looking at my notes, and it was interesting. I came across this one that I did, and it talked about how to build a relationship. So think about that. We're talking about a relationship between God and man, but I'm talking about in general, God and man, man and man, man and woman, student to teacher, parent to child. All these has taken on a different meaning now. They're taking on a different look, I'll say, it's going to be different. People say it's going to be a new normal, and I love that because I always talk about what is normal, what is abnormal. So we're going to have to redefine. And some simple things I talked about that I talk about with you is how to stimulate it, how to build a relationship. And believe it or not, the first one, and I thought was interesting, is take time to have a conversation. It sounds simple, But listen, take time to have a conversation. Talk to each other. Um, Talking is becoming a lost art. And it's interesting because I talked about prayer last week, and the way that I pray is I just talk to God. Like I'm talking to you right now. I just talk to God. God, I'm having a tough time today, really trying to get this technology thing down with my students. God, I need help stimulating my students through technology. I'm used to walking around and giving them the fist bump or giving them the high five. How do I do that through technology? God, help me actually get on Zoom or work the whole technology thing. And believe it or not, he did. I would get on Zoom and I would ask my students, how do you work this? How do you work that? And through Zoom, they would educate me. And through that education became relationship because now they saw how I needed help and they love helping me with something that I didn't know. In return, I'm helping them because they're helping me. This one, ask opening questions. That's good. Don't ask a yes or no question when you're talking to your significant other, your child, your neighbor, or anyone. When you're talking, stimulate the conversation. I bring it back to prayer. I mentioned it last week when I prayed to God. I'm so specific in my prayers now, whereas before I was general in my prayer. God, I want to feel better. Now I say, God, I want to feel better because my arm hurt. God, I want to feel better because I know if my blood pressure is going up. God, I want to feel better because I'm not eating correctly. God, I want to feel better because I stopped working out because I can't go to the gym. And he answered that one quick. He said, walk around the block. He said, go downstairs and get that cardio glide out and work on that. For specifics. This one, try an activity together. This one is interesting because now we're home. So how can you do that? My son and I, when he was home, and we do it now, talk over the phone, but we used to play checkers every day. And he was good, but I was better, and I would beat him every day. Well, because I didn't know he was doing this, he would go to his room and he would go online and look up how to play checkers. And I noticed day by day he was getting better. I'm like, well, I must be a good teacher. He's really doing a good job at this. And then he started beating me. Finally told me he went online and actually he memorized moves on how to do what he needed to do. What I'm saying, use prayer the same way. You're having a situation. You say, God, how can I do this? Instead of going online, go to the Bible. Go to the Bible. He will show you step by step on how to beat that particular situation. He will show you step by step. But you have to be willing and have an open mind. Teach you had an open mind. He said, I want to do this. I'm going to do this. Show me how to do it. Ask God to do the same thing. Number 3, don't be judgmental. Wow. Don't be judgmental. Now think about that. You're doing something, you're talking to someone, you've told them 3 or 4 times how you feel, but still they keep doing the same thing. What people say irk your nerves. Pray about it. Ask, why are they doing this? Guess what? They may not know that they're irking your nerves. They may not know because maybe you laugh when they say it, or maybe you laugh when they do it. Through conversation, through prayer, ask them, why are you doing it? I really don't like that. So why are you doing what you're doing? I was talking to God about this presentation today, and he was giving me all these general things he wanted me to do because I'm talking to different people. Different people have different needs. And I did this one, he brought it back to me. I did this last year in one of my Sunday services where I was asked to do every second Sunday I do the education ministry. And he gave this to me, and I still use this, believe it or not, because it's fascinating to me. It's called Truth or Tradition. And it gives these different percentages of different scenarios. And I thought it was interesting. And I had a lot of them, but I kept these particular ones because it really hit home with me. And it said 45% of Christians, saved folk, never share how they came to Christ. So almost half the people who come to Christ never share how or why they came to Christ. Now, in my situation, think about that. If I didn't have my wife who actually brought me to Christ, or Pastor Baker who actually brought me to Christ. And now I take that And I'm not even sure how many people I brought to Christ, because whoever I talk to, 5 minutes in conversation, I'm talking about God. They know I'm a pastor because I mention it. I'm like, because I'm so proud of what God has done for me, and I love talking about God to people. So imagine 45% of Christians never share how they came to Christ. That's mind-boggling to me. The second one, 50% of all teenagers who grew up in Christian homes never had a regular conversation about Christ. 50% of all teenagers who grew up in Christian homes never had a regular conversation about Christ. What that's telling me, they go to church, but when they come home, there's no conversation about what just happened. There's no question and answer session. There's no why did I do what I did when I prayed about it. And I know when I would go to church, that would be me. I would go to church and I would come home and I didn't talk about church. I would ask my mom a question and she would say, pray about it. And so after a while, I knew she was going to say that. So I stopped asking questions. So that's not a good statistic. The third one, 48% say they are done with God. That means they had experience in church where it was so devastating that they're not done with church, they're done with God. They just had it. Students I've talked to 2-3 weeks, pretty much we talk about a lot. And one of my students, I'll share this, one of my students actually committed suicide 2 weeks ago. And she was one of my mentees. And I found out last week that she was going through a lot. And they actually said she had no one to talk to. But with me, she would come into my room and we would sit and not talk verbally, but emotionally we would connect because she knew there was a safe zone. She knew there was a place where she could come and not say it verbally, but she knew there was Christ in the room because I told my room was anointed. 70% of unchurched people say they have never been invited to church in their whole lives. 70% of unchurched people said they've never been invited to church in their whole lives. So that means we're not talking about our home. We're not going and talking about, hey, you need to come, to our church. I'm so proud of Shabach. I tell people, come to Shabach. It's unlike any church you've ever been to. I guarantee you will have an experience. And people will come. Miss Alfonso, who I've known 30 years, and I was saying, come to Shabach, come to Shabach, come to Shabach. And finally she came and she loves it. It's like her second home now. And we have that connection because I talk about Shabbat with her. 1/3 say they come to church out of obligation. That means they come because they feel obligated. I mentioned it last week, and I say this all the time. I went to church and I prayed because I didn't believe in heaven, but I feared hell. I didn't believe in heaven, but I feared hell. So I'm like, okay, I'm not messing this up. I'm going to pray. I'm going to go to church because I felt like if God see me here, I'm good. Doesn't matter what I did, doesn't matter what I say, but it's like taking attendance, like he was going down, taking roll. That's not what it's about. And I went out of obligation, and then I started going out of need because I felt I needed to go. But then toward the end, I went out of love. I had so much love for the word and God that I felt like this is where I need to be. Now when I feel stressed, now when I feel like the whole world is on me, if I want that weight lifted, I go to God. I go to God. He's your best spotter. If you go to the gym, you need a spotter sometimes when you lift and weight, someone to be there to have the weight. God is my best spotter. A lot of people didn't get percentage, but they said church was boring. That's a mindset. That's a mindset. That's all I can say about that one. That's a mindset. Churches I've gone to when I didn't have the right mindset, yeah, they were boring because I would go with the wrong mindset. I would go with a time like, okay, 30 minutes, I got to get out of here. So after 30 minutes, if they're still going, mentally, I'm done. I'm out. They can keep going, keep talking. Done what I needed to do. I'm gone. And they were talking about one of the scriptures I was reading. It was talking about how God's love is incomprehensible, and that's true because I'm still trying to understand the power of God's love. how you can't describe it. 1 Timothy 6:16. He alone can never die. He lives in light so brilliant that no human can approach him. No human eye has ever seen him nor ever will. All honor and power to him forever. God's love, it's like, you have a best friend and you do something and he's your best friend. He's got you. He'll be there for you. You mess up again, he's like, okay, I got you. The third time, he may say, you know what, I'm done. I'm gone. I tried to talk to you. You didn't listen. I know I'm your best friend, but if you were my best friend, you wouldn't have done what you did. That whole thing. God's not like that. I pray with people, and some have said to me, I didn't want to say anything because I felt embarrassed. I didn't want to say anything because I've been doing this over and over and over, and I know it's wrong, but I continue to do it. So they put limitations on God's love. They put limitations on God's love. God doesn't have limits. You're praying about your mortgage. You're praying about your mortgage and your car. But now you say, okay, I can't pray for my mortgage, my car, and my insurance. That's too much. Says who? God doesn't have a limit. I've learned that, oh wow, 20, 30 years ago. I pray now for whatever I want. I'm very specific on what I want. And I know God can do all things. God's love can be known. This is because God makes himself known to us in a fashion that we can recognize. And I love this. It talks about how sometimes God can describe himself as a lion, a rock, fire, a moth, or even dry rot. And I'm like, okay, what does that mean? How you compare God to a lion? And then it talks about, if you think about a lion, think about who rules the jungle. Think about, the demeanor, the majesty of a lion, how he presents himself. When he roars, everyone just kind of sits up and takes notice. The protector, the whole thing. That's God. God as a rock. Think about that. When you think about God as a rock, well, God is not. Think about a rock. You think about a rock of a hard substance that's sitting there. No. Think about, people say, wow, he's as tough as a rock. He's as hard, he's hard as a rock. He is stoic. He is just non-moving, unbreakable. That's God. God is fire. God can lead, in darkness. You have the fire. God at night, when it's dark, when you're going through different situations, God is that fire. God is that light that would lead you, that light the way, Or as one person said, God, will light a fire in you, to get you to do what you need to do, what you're supposed to do. And then, he does these things to let us understand, God is a shepherd, and I love when I was talking, 15 years ago, and we were talking about, someone was mentioning, and this was fascinating to me, like God is a shepherd, like a sheep, someone will come and call the sheep, and the sheep won't go until they hear the sound of the shepherd. They recognize the shepherd's voice. They know their shepherd's voice. And God, every single sheep, he knows our voice. Someone said, I'm praying, how do I know God is listening to me? Pray. If you don't pray, he's not listening because you're not praying. If you pray, he will hear you. Continue to pray, and don't put timelines on your prayer. I mentioned last week, like I was praying to wear a suit and tie to work, and it took 10 years for me to get that particular job. But I never gave up on my vision. I had my vision, and I wouldn't deviate, and I didn't know what direction he was going to take me, but I knew I would get where I needed to go. And in those 10 years, as I stated last week, everything that happened to me in those 10 years was like a building block. It helped me get to where I needed to go. So when I finally got the position I wanted, I was so ready for it that it was unbelievable. Even though I didn't go to school to teach initially, when I got the teaching position, people couldn't believe I never taught before because of my demeanor, because the way that I would prepare myself to come into the classroom. Because I've never taught before, I over-prepared because I knew what I didn't know. And I knew God would help me in my weak spots, so to speak. What I didn't understand, what I didn't know, he would compensate and help me with those particular things. Like general lesson planning. I'll give you an example. I wasn't used to writing lesson plans. He put a mentor in my life who would give workshops on how to do lesson plans. And that's what God put in my life. So though the general prayer that I gave became very specific, and once it became specific, he was there for all my needs. So the message today is short but sweet, and that's the situation you're in now, the pandemic and the George Floyd situation. Um, you should be praying every single day for each situation. The pandemic, that once we get back into the mainstream, so to speak, we don't become the mainstream. We say focus. The George Floyd situation, that we pray that we continue to come together. And this is not a 3 or 4 week protest, but it's a rest where we get our mind together and we can sit down and just breathe. And I know, he said he can't breathe, and we need to breathe. We really need to hear God's voice and listen to God's breath, and just help us get through these days and these times. So in closing, I'd like to say thank you for allowing me to speak with you these 2 weeks, and take what I've given you and use as you will. Thank you. God bless you.